It wears a title, commands armies, and controls nations. But every once in a while, a different kind of power emerges, quiet, calculated, and almost invisible. The kind of power that doesn't need permission. In modern Russia, a country long defined by centralized authority under leaders like Vladimir Putin, there exists a rare phenomenon. A billionaire whose influence operates beyond the traditional boundaries of control. Not louder, not more public, but strategically untouchable. This is not just a story about wealth, it's about leverage, because true power in today's world is no longer about who rules the land, it's about who controls the systems beneath it. Financial systems. Energy flows. Global networks. The billionaire we're exploring represents a new class of elite individuals who don't challenge authority directly, but instead build structures so complex and globally integrated that control becomes nearly impossible. And that's what makes this story so important. Because it challenges a belief most people hold, that governments always sit at the top of the pyramid. But what if the pyramid itself has changed? What if influence today is no longer vertical, but distributed across networks of wealth, assets, and strategic relationships? This shift is subtle, but it's redefining power across the globe. And in a world where financial empires can move faster than political decisions, those who understand this dynamic don't just survive, they dominate. This is the story of a man who didn't rise by fighting power, but by designing a system where power couldn't easily reach him. Most people believe billionaires in tightly controlled systems operate under strict limits, that their wealth exists at the pleasure of political authority, but that assumption is only partially true. Because while many fortunes are built within systems, the most powerful ones are built across them. The hidden truth is this. The billionaire in question didn't just accumulate wealth locally. He diversified it globally. Energy assets in one region, financial holdings in another, strategic partnerships that stretch across continents. This creates something extremely powerful. Insulation. Instead of being dependent on one jurisdiction, his wealth exists in multiple layers: legal, geographic, and financial. And that makes control incredibly difficult. Because controlling a person is one thing, controlling a decentralized network is something else entirely. This is where most people misunderstand power. They think control comes from authority. But in reality, control comes from dependency, and this billionaire flipped the equation. Instead of depending on a system, he made systems depend on him. Energy supply chains, infrastructure investments, and international business relationships, these aren't just assets. They are leverage points, and when multiple powerful entities rely on your operations, your position becomes uniquely protected. This doesn't mean immunity, it means complexity, and complexity creates negotiation power. So, while the public narrative may suggest absolute control at the top, the real story is far more nuanced, because behind the scenes, influence is constantly being balanced, negotiated, and recalibrated, and those who master this balance don't just hold wealth, they hold position. To understand how this works, you have to shift from thinking about money to thinking about systems. Wealth alone is visible, systems are not. This billionaire didn't simply accumulate assets, he engineered interconnected structures that operate across industries and borders. Let's break it down. First, diversification at scale, not just different businesses, but different types of power, natural resources, logistics, finance, and international trade. Each of these sectors influences the others, creating a web of interdependence. Second, strategic invisibility. Unlike high-profile figures who rely on public attention, this kind of power often operates quietly. Less exposure means fewer direct points of pressure. Third, global alignment. By forming partnerships with entities outside any single country's control, influence becomes distributed. Decisions affecting his empire are no longer made in one place. This creates a powerful dynamic. Because when influence is spread across multiple systems, no single authority can fully isolate or dominate it without triggering broader consequences. This is not resistance, it's architecture. Think of it like a network rather than a hierarchy. In a hierarchy, power flows from the top down. In a network, power flows through connections, and the more critical your connections are, the more influence you hold. This is why some individuals appear untouchable, not because they are above the system, but because they are embedded so deeply within multiple systems that removing them becomes costly. And in high-level strategy, cost determines action. Not emotion, not authority, but consequence. While this level of influence may seem distant, The underlying principles are highly practical and used by successful individuals across industries. The lesson is not to replicate scale, it's to replicate strategy. High performers don't rely on a single income source. They build multiple streams that interact and reinforce each other. They don't depend on one market. They expand their reach, they don't chase visibility. They prioritize positioning because in business and wealth creation, dependence is risk. And independence is power. For example, entrepreneurs who build businesses across different platforms, digital, physical, and financial, create flexibility. Investors who diversify globally reduce exposure to local volatility. Professionals who develop multiple high-value skills increase their leverage in any environment. This is the same principle applied at a different scale. It's about creating options. Because options create control, and control creates confidence. The billionaire we're discussing didn't just aim to grow wealth, he aimed to reduce vulnerability, and that's a mindset shift most people never make. They focus on growth without thinking about structure, but growth without structure is fragile. Structure turns growth into stability, and stability, over time, becomes power. At some point, every ambitious individual faces a decision. Do you play within the system, or do you learn how to build around it? This is the turning point, because true advancement doesn't come from working harder inside existing limits. It comes from expanding the boundaries themselves. The billionaire, at the center of the story, understood something critical. Control is not something you fight. It's something you outgrow. Instead of challenging authority directly, he expanded his influence to a level where control became inefficient. And that's a powerful strategy, because when your value becomes essential across multiple systems, your position. If this changed the way you see power, wealth, and influence, then you're already ahead of most people. Subscribe for more deep insights into the strategies behind the world's most powerful individuals, because the next level of success starts with how you think.